Alright, so hello everyone and welcome back to Strategy Sunday, Volume 16. This time we're taking a closer look at Titania, just as promised. Before we begin, just a small thing. Um, Thank you very much to Kiet for helping, because before this, I was really bad with Titania. I didn't really figure out how to play her, because I was always like the guy that always wanted perfect value at every point. But yeah, that's not how you play Titania, as we'll see. So yeah, thank you very much for actually making me a quite decent Titania player. Uh, let's jump right into it. Um, Basic stats. Titania is a ranged hero with a starting health of 12. You move 2. You have a Psychic with Oberon, who is melee and has a starting health of 6. So 12 health just from the get-go is like the lowest hero health we've yet seen on solo hero characters, not like dual heroes like Cloak and Dagger or tri-heroes like the Sisters or Raptors, except for Deadpool, and we don't talk about Deadpool. Um, Being ranged, of course, helps to kite and reduce combat interactions because you only have 18 actual combat cards. So yeah, you want to mitigate as much damage on Titania as possible. So being ranged helps, of course, and having a sidekick is quite nice for even more board control. You can put him in the way to like absorb some damage, or the other way around. So it's just really nice to have that flexibility. Total health pool of 18 is actually not that bad. It's still below average for like sidekick fighters, but it's fine overall. And it definitely helps that you have a sidekick with another 6 health. And well, 12 unique cards make the deck quite consistent, card-wise. Let's go to your character ability. It's Fairy Magic. If you do not have a face-up Glamour at the start of your turn, flip the top card of your Glamour deck face up. Its effect is ongoing while it remains face up. So, what are glamours? What is the glamour deck? Hold up, hold up, hold up. Glamours will basically act as your character ability. You have 6 different glamours, out of which each has basically a different ability. Some can draw you cards, some is helping for movement, some have to do with action gain. It's basically you have 6 different character abilities that you cycle through. You don't start the game with an active glamour, because it only says if you do not have a face up at the start of your turn, then you flip it up. So if it's not your turn at the start of the game, if like your opponent is going first, well, you don't have a glamour yet, which might be interesting in some matchups, because your cards often give you the option to discard one of your glamours, or your face up glamour, I should say, to like maybe bump up value or do something else as an effect. So those cards will obviously not get their effects because you can't discard a glamour at the start of the game. That might come into play in some games. Once you have discarded all 6 glamours due to the card effects, you can't just reshuffle them. They will stay in your discard pile. You have 1 card that can bring a glamour back. You have 2 copies of that, so you technically have a max of 8 different glamours, but once they are all gone, you can't get any back, so at that point you don't have an ability, and that's of course not great. You can only have 1 active glamour at a time, of course. If you don't have 1 face up, you flip 1 face up, and you only get rid of it if you maybe discard it, and then of course it's gone. At the start of your game, think a bit about what your game plan will be, and adjust your playstyle with your glamours around that, because your 6 different glamours are all pretty niche or situational, and all like, yeah, they can differ in strength depending on the matchup and map every time. Maybe some glamours are good if you want to go like full aggressive and go for tempo. Maybe you want to draw a lot of cards, then one other will be good. If you just want to maneuver away, then you have also glamour for that. So it's always like depending on situation, game plan, whatever you want. Just think of what your game plan will be and adjust how you use them accordingly. Um, Also, always try to get the best value out of the glamour that you currently have right now, even if it means discarding it because you don't have any cards to use it for example. Um, you have a Glamour, that's Glamour Sleep, that basically says you only take combat damage. Well, that Glamour is quite useless if the opponent is Bigfoot and already played his Jackal opponent, so yeah, what does the Glamour do? Basically nothing at the given situation. So max value out of your Glamour also means at some point maybe just discarding it to get a better one. That might be the best value that you can get out of a certain Glamour at some point in the game. So what I would definitely advise you is if you draw into a Glamour and that Glamour has some like crazy effects that only really is useful in one given situation, don't try to force that situation for like the whole time. Don't just stick to that Glamour for the possibility of it being good. Go with the flow of the game. Try to manage your Glamours in a way that you can always get a good use, but don't rely on one too much, if that makes sense. But we've spoken enough about Glamours now. Let's get to them. First one, Glamour of Love. When you maneuver, you may move an opposing fighter one space before moving your fighters. So, moving an opposing fighter one space before you maneuver can be quite useful in many different ways. You could, for example, move the opposing fighter towards you to reach him without boosting. That's also like, in some cases, even better than a move 3. It's always at least move 3, but it could also be if the opponent is hiding like at a hard zone cutoff, you can move them into your zone, so you don't have to boost at all because you maybe would have had to boost with a 2 or anything else. So moving the opponent is quite nice. It can help you like get some good double attack opportunity, not double attacks, some attack opportunities if they thought they were safe. You could also just move the opponent away, of course, to exactly create that 3 space distance because you can move 2 away, you move them 1 away, so you get that 3 distance, which is really nice. So the opponent often has to boost to get to you, losing value, losing cards, which is really good for you. You could move a body blocking sidekick out of the way to reach a hero, or of course the other way around. So yeah, this is probably the most versatile Glamour overall, since it will almost always give you some kind of value, no matter what you want to do. Either it makes you easier to approach, or it makes it harder for the opponent to approach, or you can get rid of body blocks. Um, this Glamour is just so good. Very underrated. Like, the effect doesn't seem that strong, but it's really, really good, and I really like it. Next up, we have Glamour of Jealousy. When Titania or Oberon are attacked, before playing a card, they may swap spaces. If they do, your other fighter is now the defender. So, we've already seen quite similar effects on defensive cards or versatile cards. Maybe like Widow's Double Identity or Smoke and Mirrors from Houdini, where you can swap your fighters and change who actually gets attacked or who is attacking. Um, Being able to have a constant swap if needed on defense can be really nice in the early game if you want to keep Oberon alive, for example, or the other way around if the opponent is really pressuring Titania. You can just swap into Oberon so Titania gets like a bit of room to breathe, and Oberon gets on attack instead, which you might not be worried about so much. Um, However, you have to decide if you want to swap before you actually play your card. So you do not get to see which card your opponent played before you swap. Um, so that's sometimes actually quite the downfall of this Glamour because your opponent might just maybe attack Oberon with something small. Um, just to make a swap, and then, well, Oberon is a bad situation, can't go in and attack, maybe. Or the other way around, they attacked Oberon with something big, expecting you to swap to actually hit Titania big. So, since you don't know what exactly the opponent plays before, this can backfire a bit. It's not that huge of a deal most of the time, but it can. And it's not great to not know what the opponent played before. Like overall, you like to see this one as like one of your first glamours, just to keep Oberon alive or like to absorb some damage with him, because of course, once Oberon is dead, this is useless. It doesn't do anything. Um, so they're just way more impactful glamours than this usually. So this is often an easy discard for your discard card effects, where it asks you if you want to discard a glamour to do some crazy things. This is probably one of the easiest tosses, mostly. Um, but of course, early game it can be quite useful. Then next up we have Glamour of Greed. At the end of your turn, you may draw one card. So this is a pretty simple one, but actually really impactful. It's quite comparable to like a mixture of Bigfoot's ability and T-Rex's ability, where T-Rex's ability is of course a must-have that she must draw the card. In this case, you may, and that's where like the Bigfoot case comes in because he also may draw a card, but only if he's like alone in his zone with no opposing fighters. So it's just kind of the best mixture of both of them because you can always draw a card at the end of your turn, but you don't have to. So that's just really good. Um, the usefulness of this glamour will depend on your current game plan because of course if you are really aggressing the opponent a lot, um, trying to like run them out of defense, or maybe they're on a low hand size and you might want to get like a good hand advantage, this is one of your best glamours, like by far. If you're going for a more aggressive playstyle with a lot of drawing and using your glamour discards on offense, this is really good. So in that case, this is maybe even your best glamour. Um, if you're playing with a more like fatigue value game in mind, um, it might not work as well, but at least if you're getting pressured the hell lot, why ever that should happen. I don't think that ever happens as Titania too often. Or you maybe just drew into a full scheme or attack hand. You might still use this to maybe have the chance to draw into defense. So it can still be nice, but if you like go for a value fatigue game, I don't think this is the right glamour at the right point. So usually you want to see this quite early in the game or at least in the mid game because later, well, you won't have too many cards left in your deck. And if you don't have the right setup, fatigue is still a thing. Um, so yeah. Otherwise, if you just like, if you're fine with your hand size, if you don't want to overextend too much, maybe you're actually down in hand size and the opponent has to boost and you'd rather keep that, this might be an easy toss for one of your card effects, but it's still a good glamour to have overall, especially in the early to mid game to like keep up pressure, maybe to draw up your hand even faster again, and yeah, just good glamour overall. Then Glamour of Invisibility. Your fighters may move through opposing fighters. Well, this is probably the most niche glamour that you have. Because moving through opposing fighters, of course, sounds like a cool thing because it's something that you usually are not allowed to do, and there are reasons for why you're not allowed to do so. So, yeah, it sounds good, but it actually won't do as much since you're a move 2 fighter. We of course have seen this ability on Buffy, who just has that as her normal hero ability where she can move through opposing fighters. But at least Buffy is a move 3 fighter, meaning if she is adjacent to an opponent, she can just move through them next to them with a second move, and then with a third, they move. She moves like one away, so the opponent can't just double attack. With this, you're just basically swapping the side of where you're at. You'll still be adjacent to the opponent if you move through them, which didn't really change much, to be honest. Um, so in that case, it doesn't do much. Of course, you can boost your maneuver to help with that, but you don't like boosting as much as Titania. Um, because, well, you don't have so many combat cards, so if you're losing some, that hurts. Um, However, there are some use cases for this where you actually want this really bad. Maybe if you want to move through a body block to reach the opposing hero or sidekick, this can be useful. If you get pinned somehow, maybe by raptors that get like a good turn on you, you can still move out of the pin with this, even if you end adjacent with the first maneuver. Or like the probably most relevant use case, if you're on a secret passageway map, like Baskerville or Solomon's, you can move through an occupied secret passage. So that actually makes Baskerville a really good map for you as long as you have this glamour, because Baskerville then becomes just a move to center map because you can always reach, at least if you're playing against a solo hero. So that's really good, but usually you only keep this for 1 or maximum 2 turns and then discard it since it will just not give you consistent value. Most times you'll just maneuver normally and still be able to reach or whatever. Just moving through opposing fighters doesn't do much. It might help you get out of the pin in one turn, but then after that, once that's like done, you're not in the pin anymore. Well, this is basically useless again. So you keep this maybe for one, yeah, max 2 turns, and then you just basically discard this. I think this is probably the easiest discard. There's just rarely much value to this glamour, sadly. But hey, you can't have just all good ones. Next up, Glamour of Ryme. This is the scary one, like in normal game. After you play a scheme, gain 1 action. So being able to gain 1 action after every scheme you played is huge, value-wise and tempo-wise, of course. You have a total of 7 schemes in your deck, which can lead to a really big combo turn where you just chain them all together and do some nasty things. Um, However, that won't happen as often, so I think the best use for this is probably just to use it like with the schemes that you have in hand at that point, to keep up aggression, not waste actions on them, and still be able to double attack after that. And then just like once you played your one good scheme turn, I think you just discard this because well, if you already played 2 or 3 at the same time, you will need some time to draw into the other ones and to actually make this as impactful. I think you need like at least 2 or 3 schemes at the same time to actually make some big plays. So that probably won't happen in the near term. And then in that case, if you're just waiting, well, you don't have really have an active ability at the same time. So I think when you have this, when you draw into it, you just use your schemes with the action and then just move on to the next one. So yeah, in some cases, you actually want to discard this ASAP, since you won't have any passes, of course, as long as this is active. Um, so yeah, that can happen. Usually, it's not that relevant for Titania because you have Glamour of Sleep, the next one that we'll get to. But it could be impactful at some point if you need passes, definitely, because you're going to fatigue and you don't have Glamour of Sleep anymore. So yeah, in that case, you don't want this and want to discard it. But yeah, usually you just use it for the one big turn and then bye bye. And then lastly, it's the one that I mentioned the most probably now, it's Glamour of Sleep. Your fighters do not take damage other than combat damage. This Glamour is insane. Um, just from the concept of it. Not taking any damage, except combat damage, is huge for multiple reasons. First of all, of course, you ignore fatigue damage, which is like the scariest thing that this Glamour can do. So, whenever you play with Titania, if this is one of your last Glamours, you will almost always win fatigue game. Because, well, even if your deck is empty, you can just maneuver the whole time, and, well, you won't take damage. Other than that, this is actually one of the more matchup dependent ones because, well, it ignores any type of auto damage. But if you're playing against maybe like Alice, she doesn't have a lot of auto damage. She just smacks big. So in that case, the Glamour doesn't really do much. Um, if you're, however, playing against maybe Tomoe, who has basically her whole kit resolves around her ability dealing ping damage, which you would ignore, this could be really good. Same with if you're playing against Little Red, you just ignore all of the auto damage, which is really good. If you see this too early, like as your first or maybe second Glamour, I would often recommend to just discard it ASAP, since you can recur up to 2 Glamours. And of course, for that to work, you have to have the Glamour already in discard. So that just gives you like more time to put this back, to get it back on bottom, because that's of course where you want this Glamour to be as the last or maybe second to last Glamour in your deck. Because at that point where you get to that Glamour, you'll probably be like, I like at maybe 5 to 7 cards left in deck, and you're already thinking about fatigue strategies. So at that point, you probably only have to survive a bit more, and then you can, of course, draw into this when you're in fatigue game and just, well, win. So this Glamour always gives your opponent kinda a timer in which they have to kill you, because, well, if they don't manage to kill you onto fatigue, well, you'll just automatically win. So your opponent will often just try to aggress you as much as possible, or try to force you off this Glamour at some point if we're going to fatigue. Um, because that's one thing that they can do with Glamours in total. Of course, if you have cards that require you to discard a Glamour to get the card effect, the opponent can just play around that and maybe play a card that you desperately want to feint, and your feint only works if you discard a Glamour. So it will be a really bad decision for you where either you lose your important Glamour or you give them the important effect. So always try to think about that. And yeah, let's just look. I made a quick tier list about the Glamours, which doesn't say as much to be honest. Um, because placements of these Glamours will always depend on the given game state and matchup. So don't stick to this. This is just a general overview of how useful I think the Glamours are. I don't think there are any like particularly bad ones that you just will never use, that just kind of ruin your deck. There's one quite niche one with invisibility because, yeah, moving through opposing fighters. I mean, it can be nice on specific maps, so yeah. The situational ones, jealousy, if you have it early, good. If Oberon's dead, discard. Then the often great ones are the ones that just mainly depend on your current hand and current game strat. Glamour of Sleep is probably the scariest one overall that your opponent always thinks about. Glamour of Ryme is probably the second scariest just because you can have that huge combo turn. Um, and then Glamour of Greed is just decent overall, always drawing cards because Titania is mostly played as an aggressive fighter, pressuring your opponent down, not getting attacked too often, but more so attacking them. And then at the end you switch to sleep and win. But the one that is probably always good, um, for me is Glamour of Love. That one will just be always at some use for you. It will always bring value, no matter how you use it. So yeah. Well, let's get into the cards. Queen of the Fairies. 2 value attack for Titania. Boost value of 3. You have 2 copies. It says during combat, increase the value of this card by +1 for each Glamour in your Glamour discard pile. So, 2 value attacks are usually just played for their effects, and who would have thought this one is as well. This scales with your discarded Glamours, meaning if you have more Glamours in discard pile, this will be a higher value attack. So that kind of incentivizes you to discard Glamours faster if you have this in hand, just to like have the potential of a high scary attack. If all 6 Glamours are in discard, this of course could be an 8 value attack, which is insane. But it also becomes really predictable. If the opponent has a feint, and they see, well, you just got your 6th Glamour into discard pile and you're now attacking, they'll probably feint. Because they're expecting this and they're scared. So maybe the best play with this is to not always not always go for maximum value with this, because even a 5 or a 6 still hurts enough if you're throwing it from ranged, or even a 4 in some cases. Especially if you draw this card pretty early, I don't think there's like a reason to always keep it in hand and wait until you get max value. Like I said with the Glamours, it's just going with the flow. If you can play this as a 5 value attack, it's fine. It's still a really good attack. If you can play it as 6, even better. If the situation should come and you are able to play this as a 7 or 8, go for it. Definitely. But don't try to get that as your win condition or anything else. Just use it at the right time for like the best value that you can get without like waiting too long, making it block up your hand. And then this is a really good card. Next up, By Moonlight is a 5 value attack for Oberon only. With a boost value of 2, you have 3 copies. It says after combat, place Oberon in a space adjacent to Titania. So 5 value attacks are always great. Max value block is 4 usually, average value block is usually 3, so this will usually do like 1 or 2 combat damage, which is really good because you have 3 copies of it, so that's a good amount of damage. This is definitely a reason for you to keep Oberon alive, at least for like the first couple of turns. You really like to see those early because, of course, once Oberon is dead, well, they're useless. So that's also like an incentivizer for your opponent to go for Oberon because, well, of course, they don't want to get smacked for 3/5s at the start of the game. Makes sense, I guess. The effect is quite nice since if you're going in with Oberon, you can maneuver away with Titania at the same point, attack with this, and then kite with advantage, meaning you maneuver it in and then Oberon will get placed next to Titania, so you can hide them, and the opponent again has to maneuver up to you and attack, meaning you can double attack on your next turn. So that is really good. Also, it helps you to protect Oberon a bit more because, of course, you can hide him behind Titania if you use this. So just really good card overall. You love to see some 5-value attacks, printed 5s. They're always good. So yeah. Next up, Whisk Away is a 4-value versatile. This time on any, so both fighters can use it. 1-value boost, you have 3 copies. It says, after combat, move your fighter up to 2 spaces. You may discard your Glamour. If you do, place your fighter in any space. So 4-value versatiles are great. Max value block, you don't really complain. Even as an attack, 4 is still good. Moving either fighter up to 2 spaces is basically just a better skirmish effect, since it isn't conditional. As like actually it's the same. Um, oh, it's not move either fighter, it's move your fighter. Ah, yeah, I'm trash. I can't read. My bad. um, move your fighter up to 2 spaces is still like really good. Um, in that case, it's kind of like Jetpack from Jill. Um, well, just moving 2 away, it can again kite with advantage. It can prevent double attacks. If you for some reason had to go next to the opponent to attack them, they can attack first action, you defend with this, move away so they can't attack again, which is really good. Um, the Glamour discard usually is not needed for the effect to work. Um, Maybe if the opponent also played a movement of attack or defense or whatever, so they still end next to you. That could be a problem, but just moving 2 away is usually all you want in a given situation, and placing your fighter in any space, yeah, it can be really good to create some more distance between you and your opponent, but I think this discard is mostly just used to discard your current Glamour because you don't like it, and to cycle to the next one, more so than for the actual effect of this card. Next up we have Fairsong, which is a 3-value versatile. Any, so both fighters can use it again. It's a 2 boost, you have 3 copies. It says during combat you may discard your Glamour. If you do, the value of this card is 5 instead. So 3-value versatiles are good overall, average value block. Probably not going to do much on attack, but you have the effect. This can become a 5 if you discard your Glamour, which is really good. It's still an okay card, even if you don't use your Glamour, because it's so 3-value versatile. And at some point, you'll probably have to make some compromise with Titania, where you say, okay, well, I don't get to use this effect now because I want to keep my Glamour, or I just don't have any more Glamours to discard. Don't shy away from that. It can still be okay. It's of course not the best that can happen. But it's also not the worst. It's still an okay card overall. But the good thing is it can become a 5, and 5-value attacks are really good. Oberon can also attack with this, so it makes him even more scary. So you don't actually need to put Titania up front the whole time, but if you need, you can also play this as a 5-value block, which is of course really, really good. So yeah, just a really good card overall, pretty versatile in how you use it, either on attack or defense, depending on the situation, what you can do. And yeah, nothing really to complain about it. Next up, the Moon Looks Down. It's a 3-value versatile for Titania only with a boost value of 2. You have 2 copies. It says, after combat, put a discarded Glamour on the bottom of your Glamour deck. So this is the card that I already talked about earlier, where you can like return a already discarded Glamour. 3-value versatiles on their own, just like I said before, are quite good. Being able to recur up to 2 Glamours to the bottom of your Glamour deck is very important for you because, of course, the deck is shuffled at the start of the game, so you don't know when which Glamour will come. So there might be the case where you maybe have Glamour of Sleep as your first Glamour, which is absolutely useless, and you'll have to discard it for some of your other effects. So in that case, you wouldn't be able to use Glamour of Sleep for your end fatigue game. With this card, of course, you can just put it back on the bottom of your Glamour deck, which is really important because in that case, well, Sleep is on bottom, which is exactly where you want it to be, and you have your fatigue strat going again. It can just outright give you up to 2 additional Glamours, which means 2 additional discarding effects if needed, which is really nice because, of course, if you discard your Glamour for the effect, the card will almost always, or actually always, be stronger than it would otherwise. Um, And yeah, if you have a really good Glamour early, you can just use this card to put it back on bottom. Of course, ideally this is used for sleep, or if you don't have it, for love, since those are just the most versatile or scariest. But if you can just get any Glamour back to get another discard effect, it's still fine. Um, I would just actually, in that case, if you don't know what to put back, I would go by the Glamour tier list usually. I think just the best thing there would be Sleep, then Love, and then like the great ones. So yeah, your opponent, of course, will often try to feign this because, well, if you have two less Glamour discard effects, that's really good. If you don't have any active hero ability anymore, that's good for them. And of course, if you have Sleep in discard pile, they don't want you to get it back. Makes sense, I guess. Um, so in that case, if you have Sleep early, for example, you might want to discard it ASAP just to have more time for this card. Um, so that the opponent like always has to think about, is it this now to recur Sleep or not? So you have a higher chance of actually getting this and baiting up their feigns. Um, so yeah, this card is just really crucial to your playstyle, even though it's not the best on its own. Next up, we have Parting Gift, which is a 2-value versatile any, both fighters can use it. Boost to 1, 2 copies. After combat, you may deal 2 damage to each fighter in the combat. So, 2-value versatiles are okay, I guess. Dealing 2 damage to both fighters in the combat, however, can be a really nice amount of auto damage. If you do it with both of these cards, that's 4 damage that your opponent can basically do nothing about, except if it's like fainted. However, you also take that damage yourself, which isn't great. Ideally, this is used with Glamour of Sleep, because Glamour of Sleep, of course, means you only take combat damage, and, well, effect damage is not combat damage, so you would not take damage from this card. Um, which is really good. But of course, in that case, it also becomes predictable again that you want to use this as sleep with sleep, which doesn't make it like any worse. It just means that the opponent is more likely to feint it. So don't rely on it too much if you actually use it with Glamour of Sleep. One thing that I would usually advise doing is using this as a last Hail Mary for Oberon. For example, if he's at 1 health and gets attacked and will die anyways, you might just play this because if he dies, this is not conditional on like adjacency or anything else that requires your fighter to be alive. You can just still deal 2 damage to both fighters, even though Oberon would already be dead. You can still deal 2 damage to the opponent, which is really good. Or on the other hand, if you attack with Oberon because you feel like he will die next turn, you just don't want him around anymore because your opponent could farm an effect off of him maybe. You might want to attack with this to kill him off yourself and still deal the 2 damage back to your opponent, which could be really good. So those are like the main 2 use cases, either with Glamour of Sleep or with Oberon for like the last way to go. Of course, other than that, you can still use it normally. If you just want to get your opponent down to a lethal range, um, dealing 2 damage to them is still nice, and at some point you can still afford it because you have a bit of healing. If you feel like it, yeah, go for it. Next up, we have As Wise as Beautiful. It's a 2-value versatile for Titania only. 2 boost, 3 copies. It says after combat, draw 1 card. You may discard your Glamour to draw 2 cards instead. So 2-value versatiles are okay, I guess. They're there. Drawing 1 card after combat is quite nice to keep up hand advantage and pressure, where your opponent defended and of course lost 1 card from their hand. You can play this and also draw 1 again, basically replacing this card, so you can keep up hand advantage, aggression, pressure, which is like the main thing that Titania wants to do, at least at the start of the game. That's just nice. Discarding your Glamour for 1 extra card is not that great of a deal. If you actually have like a useful Glamour. However, um, I think it's more so used just to cycle through your Glamours again. Like the drawing 2 is not as bad. It's quite nice to keep up even more pressure, and if you just want to cycle through your Glamours, it might also give you more options because if you of course maybe attack with this, and use it for the discard, you won't have active Glamour on your opponent's turn because you only reveal a new one at the start of your turn, so you won't have any Glamour. In which case, you might want to have the two cards instead of one, just to have more options on defense-wise, which might be quite good. And I mean, it's just overall good if you want to cycle your Glamours. It's mostly used as a bait attack or to catch your opponent off guard on defense, because of course, well, you might take some big damage over this if you defend with it, but at least you can draw two cards instantly, get your Glamour away, and because it will be your turn next, you can instantly get a new Glamour, which your opponent maybe didn't expect instantly, and you got two new cards. So it might shift the game state a bit um, to get you some good attacks. So yeah, that's the main use of this card. It's okay overall. Nothing too scary, but I mean, for an aggressive fighter, usually drawing cards is always good. So yeah. Next up, Protection of the Fairy Woods. It's a 2-value block card. Any, both fighters can use it, with a 1-value boost, 3 copies. It says immediately you may discard your Glamour. If you do, cancel all effects on your opponent's card. Alright, so I already talked about this earlier a bit. This is your only real feint in the deck, and it is conditional on you discarding a Glamour. So that's not great in many situations. For one, of course, you might have a Glamour that you want to keep. If you're, of course, maybe at the end game and you're at Glamour of Sleep, well, you don't want to discard that, really, because, well, if you discard it, you'll take fatigue damage again. But at the other hand, you might give your opponent some really good effects. Maybe they have a recursion effect where they can just shuffle cards back the whole time if you don't cancel. So that might be a really difficult decision for you to make. If it's fine for you to just like not cancel and the opponent can always recur their stuff, or do you actually want to cancel but then you use your important Glamour? Um, on the other hand, if you don't have a Glamour at the point, well, of course you can't feint. Just like I said before, if you use a Glamour on offense, maybe like on Fairsong to attack with a 5, um, since you discarded the Glamour, you won't have a Glamour on your opponent's turn, because you only reveal a new one at the start of your turn. So you won't have the option to feint, as long as like you don't have a Glamour. So it's not great. This will probably be the most like polarizing discard um, Glamour wise, like the discarding Glamour effect cards. Since it depends just the most on the current game state, your opponent's cards, your cards, your current Glamours, if you have any or whatever, um, it will. This is like the most difficult decision that I mostly have with Titania with the Glamour discarding effect, because the most other ones are like, yeah, they're fine to cycle the Glamours, but that's it. This is one that you actively often just need. So um, it will make a difficult decision in many games if you want to cancel or not, and how you play around this when you actually want to use your Glamours on attack, and then be vulnerable to effects because you can feint. It's something that you definitely have to think about, and that the opponent will of course play around. If they're skilled enough and have played against Titania a couple of times, they will know that if you don't have a Glamour, you can't cancel. So it is something that you definitely have to take into consideration whenever you play with Titania and think about discarding your Glamours. So yeah, but overall, it's still nice to have the option of feinting. So yeah, it's a good card overall. Just can create some hard decisions, but I'm sure if you get enough experience with Titania, you'll still be able to master those. And then we'll get to the last actual combat card before we jump into the schemes. It's But a Dream. It's a 0-value block for Titania only. You have 2 copies of it, and it has a boost value of 2. It says immediately cancel all effects on your opponent's card, ignore its value, and return it to your opponent's hand. After combat, draw 1 card. So 0-value blocks are, huh? I think zero value blocks are always these kind of crazy things with insanely crazy effects, like maybe bewilderment or something like that. This is basically a get out of jail free card. Like this card always means if you play it on defense, you don't take damage because of course you cancel all effects, you ignore the value, and you return it to your opponent's hand. So basically, if you play this on defense, it's like the opponent didn't play a card and didn't attack you. Um, which sounds good. But then on the other hand, it doesn't sound great because you basically wasted this card and your opponent didn't do anything. They still got their card back, so they'll be able to attack you next time with it again, and you just wasted this card. So, huh? That, this card I really didn't like it at the start. Of course, it also like replaces itself with a draw one at the end of at the after combat effect. So at least you're staying even in hand size with your opponent. But the best thing that this card does is it's taking away a full action from your opponent, which can be huge. Maybe they wanted to like get some draw from their maybe piercing shot or something. You say, nope, you didn't. Maybe they wanted to deal you like big damage with lock to finish you off. You say, nope, you didn't, and you'll have an extra turn to live and maybe draw something better. Um, if they wanted to do like any other cool effect, you say, no, you don't. So that's really, really good. Most crucially ones, of course, you can make Moonlight, for example, waste a whole counter turn. If Moonlight maneuvers as Khonshu and then smacks you with the +2 that he has only once in every 3 turns, you can say, nope, and that's whole Khonshu turn wasted. Shakespeare can't add stuff to his line, Tesla can't go for like big coil discharge turns, madness, Hamlet wastes his whole not to be turn. This card is just insanely strong if used properly. Um, Taking the action away is really strong. It gives you more time. It can catch your opponent off guard. Maybe they plan around getting their card's effects or anything else. This card is just really, really good. I really like it. You don't want to use this early in the game as much because in that case, well, it's already gone. And early in the game, you can still like live with some things if you maybe have to block a log with a 2, well, it's okay because you still have a lot of health to work with. So you'd rather keep this for the situations where you really need it, or where you can like make some good plays with it. But overall, really, really cool card. Um, Probably one of my favorites in the whole deck, and yeah, I really like it. Then, like I said, let's get to the schemes. Gift of the Fairfolk. It's a scheme. Any of your fighters can use it. 2 value boost and 3 copies. It says choose 2 different effects. One of your fighters recovers 2 health, draw 2 cards, move 2 fighters up to 2 spaces each. So having the option of choosing effects on a scheme is always nice since you can just adjust your choices depending on the given situation. Um, all 3 of these effects are actually really good. If you just maybe took some early damage and need to create some space between you and your opponent, you can just recover 2 um, and move like you and yourself and your opponent up to 2 spaces, so you create like the 4 space gap between you, which is really good. If you just like want to go on the aggressive, maybe with Glamour of Ryme, you draw 2, move 2 fighters, so you can create a double attack opportunity by moving the opponent closer to you and yourself also closer to them. You draw 2 cards and then also gain the action from Ryme, which is really good. This card is just overall, you'll always find a good use case for this. Um, just value-wise speaking, if you of course use all 3 of these for the healing and something else, you'll have a total health pool of 24, which is actually really good. At that point, we're like already getting into the above average territory. Um, so yeah, that's really good to have. And like I said, all of these effects are always kind of useful in some way. Um, of course, it's best used with Glamour of Ryme at the same time because you can still keep up tempo and still attack or something else, or even maneuver away after if you need. But yeah, this is just a really versatile card, and I really like it. Oh, and one cool thing that I forgot. Um, it says 1 fighter recovers 2 health. It doesn't say which fighter. It can be you, it can be Oberon, It can be your opponent, it can be a teammate in 2v2. Um, so yeah, that's really cool. I don't think it will come off up too often, but hey, you could maybe heal your teammate in 2v2. You could heal any Christmas if you're playing against her, so she doesn't get a +2 value attack on you next turn, which is like really cool. Someone made a puzzle for that on Discord, where like you had to find a solution of how Titania wins, and it was by healing Annie, and it was really cool. Like that was just, if that ever comes up in a normal game, I'll just salute to the designers of Titania's deck, and say good job. So yeah, next one, Momentary Glance. Titania only scheme, 4 value boost, 2 copies. Says deal 2 damage to any fighter in Titania's zone. So we've already seen this card in Medusa's deck, which is already a good sign because, well, it's Medusa. So any of her cards are probably really good. Um, Dealing 2 damage to any fighter in Titania's zone is quite nice for the auto damage. Um, just combined with with Parting Gift, you can have a potential of 8 auto damage, which is already like half of most heroes' health. So yeah, that's really good to have. 8 damage that the opponent can't do anything about, really good. Um, this is again ideally used with Glamour of Ryme to still attack the opponent afterwards, since you don't really care about passes and fatigue, just due to Glamour of Sleep. Um, and of course, this punch of 2 glances, dealing them 4 and then still attacking them 2 times is just really, really cool. And of course, keeps up tempo, makes the opponent worried even more about their health, so they'll run away and not attack you as often, which means you'll have enough health and enough cards defense-wise to actually do your sleep plan for later. Um, Other than that, you can of course still play this as a pass. However, it says deal 2 damage to any fighter in Titania's zone. So if there's no opposing fighter in Titania's zone, but maybe only yourself, of course, because you will always be in your own zone, or Oberon, you'll still have to deal 2 damage to either Titania or Oberon if they're in her zone. So if there's no one left and it's just Titania, well, we have to deal the 2 damage to yourself, which is not great. Of course, if you have Glamour Sleep, well, doesn't matter, but in that case, you could just maneuver. Um, and it wouldn't be like anything different, except you still have this card. But yeah, ideally, just Ryme, play both, deal 4 damage to the opponent out of nowhere, still attack 2 times. Bam. Really cool. And then, okay, I said Butter Dream could be my favorite card. Now this is my favorite card. Look at him, he's so sexy. Like, I'd become gay for him. Instantly. Definitely. What fools these mortals be is an Oberon scheme only. 2 value boost, 2 copies. It says, choose an opponent, look at their hand, and choose a card. They shuffle that card into their deck. So looking at an opponent's hand is always quite nice to get a bit of hand knowledge. Hand knowledge just from its own is really good because you know what you're working with, you know what your opponent could defend with or attack with at the point right now, so you can adjust your own attacks or defenses just from there. Um, if maybe you're looking if your opponent has a skirmish in hand, which would be the only block that saves them, and you see, yeah, they have it, you might want to try baiting it out, or you see, oh, they don't have it, so you can guarantee kill them with some cool attack or whatever. Or like you look for other important cards that they might have. Um, if you're playing in a certain matchup with a recursion fighter, maybe, and you see, well, they have their recursion card in hand, and you currently don't have a feint, well, you just choose that card and shuffle it back into the deck. Of course, shuffling it back will increase their deck size, which means they will have like more maneuvers and fatigue, but again, you don't really care. You have Glamour Sleep. Um, so it's not great, but it's not the main point of this card. The main point of this card, of course, is getting rid out of a card from your opponent's hand that is, in this moment, really valuable for them. If you're going to attack them, rip out their best block. If you're scared about them attacking you, rip out their best attack and shuffle it back into the deck, because chances are they'll not instantly draw it again. So that's really good. Of course, if you combine this with Glamour of Ryme, holy, you can rip their two best blocks out of the hand, and then still attack 2 times, which is really scary, of course. That's like the ideal situation for this. But again, it won't come up as much because you'll have to have the Glamour of Ryme at the right time, plus you'll have to have this still in your hand, plus you have to have Oberon alive. Not really your win condition. It's really cool if you can make it, but it shouldn't be like your main game plan. And if you can't play with Glamour of Ryme, like, yeah, you'll maybe be able to attack your opponent once after ripping out one card, which it can be it can be impactful if your opponent only had one defense, maybe but just due to bad draw order. Um, so yeah, that can be interesting. Or maybe they only have one cancel in hand and you want to go for a Queen of the Fairies attack. It can still be impactful, don't get me wrong, but it's like, yeah, it's quite versatile, but not as impactful usually just played on its own, if not like in a big combo turn. That won't happen as often. So it's not really the big reason to keep Oberon alive if you already played your fives. This isn't like the most important scheme in your whole deck. So yeah, you can let it slide and let him die at that point. And yeah, we'll get to the conclusion. Titania is a really versatile fighter with many different win conditions. You have so many options of how to play around your glamours. You have so many different win strategies just by like maybe drawing a lot with the Glamour of Greed and just driving your opponent out of defense. You can just aim for a good combo turn if you get the right combination with Glamour of Ryme. Or you can just go for the nasty fatigue value game with Glamour Sleep, where you make the opponent boost so they don't have so many attacks to actually throw into you, and then you'll survive and, well, sleepwalk to death. Um, in many games, you can just aim for one of these strategies um, to either just apply a lot of pressure and um, try to kill them, or just to go for the value game with sleep. But I wouldn't advise to actually stick to that the whole time. Just say, okay, it's this matchup. I just do this, and yeah, that's it. Titania is mostly a fighter where you have to go with, I already repeated it a couple of times, go with the flow of your cards, of your glamours. Get the most value that you can in the moment, and if you can't seem to get any good use, discard the glamour, next one. Just try to get like a good flow going, that you always do something with the things. Don't stick to a glamour for too long, just because there might be some cool plays, because in that case you're using your cards suboptimally, and it won't be great. Often you'll have to do slightly suboptimal plays, um, just like because maybe you're losing Glamour of Ryme early and you can't get the combo turn, but it's fine. It's fine overall. I can say that definitely now after playing her a lot. Um, you'll get some way better use after that out of some other glamours, and that's kind of like the theme of this deck. You'll never have like the perfect combination the whole time. You just have to make the best out of what you have at that point, and then once you can't get any more value, move on, next one. She's definitely a really tricky fighter that requires a good understanding of the game state, your win condition, your opponent's win condition, what your decks are, and like what do you want to do with your glamours to make like the choices of when to discard what, or like what to do, which game plan you want to follow. That it makes those decisions a bit easier if you know like exactly what your deck does, what your opponent's deck does, and how actually the game looks at the given point, if you'll be able to kill your opponent or if they'll like rather kill you at that point. But if you can actually master this, Titania will become a real beast because she has all the options. She can basically play any type of game that you want at any given point, just that you'll have to work for it a bit. You might have to make some suboptimal plays, you might have to actually sacrifice a bit of things, but at the end, you'll still come out victorious in many cases if you just like do what the deck wants you to do, which is like cycle, use everything at the right point, and then next. So yeah, cool fighter overall. I'd not recommend her to newer players just because she is pretty like tricky to pick up and to play optimally after that. But if you like if you like heavy decision-making fighters that just become better on every time that you play them, this is probably one thing for you. She's actually pretty similar to Genie in that case. And yeah, I've seen it. We'll do Genie at some point. Just yeah, starting to study in next month. So let's see. Then Titania card tier list. Of course, placements will always change depending on the matchup, and some of these cards will also like be better with some glamours, be worse with some glamours, and yeah, you know the drill. Um, I don't think there's any like outright bad card that's like the E tier in Titania's deck. I would say what fools these mortals be is a C tier card just because, well, if you don't use it with Glamour of Ryme, it actually doesn't do that much. Um, it can be nice, but it won't like get as much value usually. In that one case in 10 games where you actually get it with Ryme, oh yeah, oh yeah, it can be really nasty. But you can't really build on that. It will just be due to luck at the right point with the right draw order and the right glamour. So overall, quite inconsistent. So I'll just put it at C tier, but it has really, really high potential. Um, B tier are just the overall fine cards that will get you some value in each game. Um, Protection of the Fairy Woods, cancel, always good. I would put it in A tier if it was just a normal cancel in this deck, but since it's like based on discarding a glamour, there can be some problems with it. Parting Gift, a bit predictable if used on sleep. Other than that, only really like one good use case to like throw away Oberon for it, because otherwise you take two yourself. Just okay overall, but of course, it again requires like a certain game state where Oberon is low on health or you have Glamour of Sleep to actually use it perfectly, which again you won't always do. So in that case, yeah, you take two yourself as well. But I mean, it's auto damage. You don't really complain about that either. Um, Moon Looks Down, really good card, just to get like an additional glamour back. Um, in that case, like effect-wise, it would probably be ARS tier, but the card itself is just a three value versatile. Um, and it again depends on which glamours you already have in discard pile, but it will always get some use out of it. Just that it won't be as impactful as other cards in the moment, but it can give you, of course, the long-term strategies with Glamour of Sleep or anything else. And then as Wise is beautiful, good bait attack overall. Can like still be used as a block to draw two as well, um, and that can be quite good. So yeah. And then an A tier, I have Queen of the Fairies, which is like usually used at the 5 to 6 value attack point, which is really good, of course. Can still be fainted, but hey, it's technically your highest attack. Whisk Away, you don't complain about a 4 value block, or even attack if you want to. Then By Moonlight, it's a 5 value attack. It's just good. Um, Same with Fairsong, 5 value attack or defense, good. And then the S tier ones, I would say the cards that are just like always really good and can make some game defining plays. Um, I think Momentary Glance is just a menace in Titania's deck. Being able to deliver that 1-2 punch with just 4 auto damage instantly and then still attack is really strong. And even if you don't use it with Glamour of Ryme, just instantly dealing 4 auto damage or 2 auto damage here, 2 auto damage there is really strong. It's like it's really strong card, even in Medusa's deck, so that always says it all. But a dream, it's so cool. If you manage to use it at the right point, it can instantly like destroy your opponent's whole game plan, which is really funny. Um, and then Gift of the Fairfolk, like the most versatile card in the whole deck. That is always great. You can always make it like for some good value in any case, in any matchup, in any game state. It's just really, really good card. And then we'll get to the matchups. As always, only based on personal experiences, so feel free to disagree. Um, don't try it. Bigfoot. Nope. He hits too hard. He just kills you. Same with Houdini. Medusa has a shit ton of discard, and you don't like discard, and well, you only have 18 combat cards, 16 if you count Butter Dream, because well, it returns your opponent card to hand, so only half of your deck is actual things that you can use. So if you have to discard even more, well, not great. Electra is Electra, not much to say. Wukong again, he makes you lose so many cards, just like Medusa. Yeah. And then slightly bad ones are mostly like the other high meta fighters, like Luke smacks you. Yen has a really good value game. You lose so many cards. Achilles smacks you. She-Hulk smacks you and throws at you because you still only have 12 health. Um, Strange is Strange. And Daredevil, well, you have conditional cancels, so he'll like pretty easily recur with Devils because you can't ever use your glamours on offensive discarding for the whole time. So yeah, not great. Then the even ones, most notable, Moonlight. Um, it's mostly about like how you actually play around each other's current like abilities, because Moonlight of course has his set turn from Mr. Knight, Moon Knight, Khonshu, and you have your glamours that you cycle through. So who plays around the other cycle best? Tesla is a really cool one where you just both go full aggro, brrr, and it's a really cool matchup. Goldbat, you can try to aggress really much, and it will just, yeah, be like, if he survives the first couple of turns and can stabilize without taking too much. Um, Jill is a fun one because, well, you can also at some point go for the fatigue game. Red is a fun one with like all the other damage that you have to worry about. Same with Widow, although she can also like make you discard a lot. Those are just like really fun and even matchups. Also the Tomoe one. Um, yeah, they're really cool. And the Titania favorite ones, there aren't too many notable ones. Like the most interesting one would probably be Injin, because you have like Glamour of Love that can move him away. You have Invisibility that moves through workers. You have Gift of the Fairfolk that can move him out. Um, and at some point you can also just like Glamour of Sleep and still pop his traps without taking damage, which is like really bad for him for fatigue wise. And then almost free win. I shit you not, Sherlock. The best character in all of Unmatched is free win for Titania. Once you have Glamour Sleep, you've won. You just maneuver away the whole time. Sherlock doesn't have damage. He always relies on his effect damage from Counterpunch or Confirm, and you just don't care if you have the Glamour of Sleep. Because, well, Sherlock can have as many passes as he wants. If he can't kill you in the time until his deck is empty, well, it doesn't matter that yours is empty first. So yeah, you just double maneuver the whole time, try to discard as many glams as possible, and then you have sleep and you win, which is really cool. I mean, I love some Sherlock counters. That's like, ah, juicy. And then we'll get to the maps. Titania mostly likes maps where she can mess with the opponent's positioning even more than usual and put them into bad situations because, of course, you have Glamour of Love, which can move the opponent. You have Gift of the Fairfolk, where you can move the opponent. You have Glamour of Invisibility, where you can move through them to avoid like tricky situations. So you don't really get punished as much by positioning heavy maps if you make a mistake or your opponent puts you somewhere. Um, so like the best maps you can ever pick for Titania, item maps. Item maps are insane for her. Like you have so much control about positioning, and Glamour of Love is just a menace. And then honorable mention, I would say Hanging Gardens, High Ground, of course, as well. Getting +1 on almost every attack that you throw. It's juicy. It's really good. And yeah, I wouldn't say like the item maps are in any particular order. They're just all equally good. It just depends a bit. As Kitchen, of course, you get the extra card from the payphone and a bit of healing. Navy Pier, you get even more healing, which is really good. And Sanctum, you can get more draw to like do more stuff, and you can like instant play Scheme from deck with Glamour of Ryme, which is also really cool. So yeah, you can interchange these at any time. If your opponent doesn't ban any of them, pick one of them. And yeah. And then, thank you for watching. Feel free to write feedback, questions, comments, whatever you want. Down there, please tell me which character you also want me to cover next on the list. Planned are Golden Bat, and after that, I'll take a look at Luke Cage just because he's so meta relevant right now. And well, some of Legends just started now with the actual Legends division, so yeah. taking a look at some meta fighters might help people. And then also on the list are Genie. Yeah, I'll keep him here, but like I said, I'll start studying next month, so I don't know if I'll have actually the time to take a full deep dive into Genie. Other than that, Black Panther, yeah, he'll probably be one of the next, just because I don't want to invest too much time into him. And then Houdini. Um, but yeah, other than that, of course, Matchup Monday will drop tomorrow with the Little Red versus Tesla matchup. It was a really fun game. Actually, we played like 4 games and they were even crazier. Like the first one was already crazy, which is the one that I actually used now, but like the other ones after that were even insaner. Like holy. Um, so yeah, and other than that, I already made a small community post where you can vote for the next matchup. So if you haven't checked it out yet, go to my community section and vote there. So yeah, and if there's any matchup that you want to see that is not on the 5 options that I can give there, write it in the comments. I already included like the Electro Houdini one from a comment last time, which is, I think, actually a pretty cool matchup, even though I don't want people to know about the strat as much. But, well, I'm telling people of cool strategies here, so yeah, why not? And yeah, until next time. Bye bye.